Hello and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob. In today's video, this one's just going to be kind of a fun and goofy video. I'm going to be telling you about the Bard campaign I'm currently playing in. So I'm not actually a dungeon master in this campaign, I'm a player. And it is probably the most ridiculous and cheesy campaign I've ever been a part of so far. And fortunately, it's just getting started. And it's been pretty funny. So I just thought I'd kind of talk about it and how ridiculous things have been. And I guess it'll be kind of like a campaign review part one or something, I don't know. Either way, I just thought it was funny, so I want to talk about it. So just as a quick overview, we have 6 people in this group. It's a pretty large group. We have a couple of new players, although one of them we'd played Shadowrun with before, but we'd never played Dungeons and Dragons with him. Everybody in the campaign is a bard, but you are allowed to multi-class. We all started at level 4, but the Dungeon Master said we had to have at least 3 levels of bard because he wanted everybody to have a bardic college. So that was the idea. We all kind of met when we were going to like our bard colleges and decided that when we graduated we were going to form a band. And now we've set out into the world to find fame and fortune and groupies and everything else that goes along with it, right? So we chose a name for ourselves. We just looked through the spell list until we found some cool names, and we went with Crown of Madness, named after the spell obviously, and we thought that was a cool name for band, so that is who we are. I can't remember all the player names, like the characters' names, so I will just briefly tell you the players and who's in the party, essentially. So our lead singer is Troy, and he is just going straight bard. He's a College of Eloquence bard. Next to him, usually, we have Paul. He was the Shadowrun guy. He is playing a bard paladin. Next to him, we have his girlfriend Odessa, and she is playing a bard barbarian, the Bardbarian, as I love to call it. Next to her, we have Mike. Mike is playing this like fairy Tinkerbell type creature. I think she's about a foot tall though, instead of 6 inches or whatever. But she has wings and she can fly. And I mention that because it's going to be relevant in the story later on. Mike's character is a bard and rogue multi-class. Next to Mike, we have his wife Trish. Trish is playing a bard monk multi-class. And then finally we have me, and I am playing a bard warlock, which is actually the character I'd mentioned in my bard multi-class video, right? That I started a bard warlock. So that is the party, essentially. Everybody has multiple instruments they play. I think every single person in the band has expertise at performance. And of course we all have decent charisma because we're all bards. And because every single person is a bard, whenever we have to perform, we always just pass bardic inspiration die to the player on our left. And so when I mention in the story here that we tend to really crush it in our performances, bear in mind, this is not an exaggeration. We all have expertise, we all have good charisma, and we all have bardic inspiration. So yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. Our Dungeon Master's been quite dismayed by some of the dice rolls we've been coming up with. Anyways, so our story kind of begins with us setting out on the road. We go into this small town, and I mean, it's not even really a town. I believe there's 14 people that live in the town, and then there's some farms and stuff in the outlying area, of course, right? But only 14 people in the town proper. So we go to the inn / tavern / town hall, probably, whatever it is, and we decide that we'd like to perform. So, they agree to let us perform, and, we end up making a bunch of dice rolls. Basically, the Dungeon Master made us do 3 sets, and everybody has to make performance rolls for each set. So we end up, bringing in some people, and more people, and then more people by the end of the night. Basically, all 14 people in the town are actually now here in the establishment listening to us. And because we did so well, we ended up getting a couple of real super fans who were just think we're the best. And he's like, whenever you guys go anywhere, these super fans will try their best to make it there, right? So they're pretty much going to be in the audience every time we perform. So we're pretty excited about that. At first place, there's only 14 people here, and 2 of them are now super fans. That's pretty good, we think. So the next day, though, as we're getting ready to leave, another band comes into town. It turns out these guys perform here all the time, and they're not very happy that we performed in their town and are on their territory, so to speak. They're even more unhappy because they hear that we actually crushed it the night before and are better than them. So they challenged us to a battle of the bands. And of course, you can never turn something like that down. I, however, couldn't help but notice that when they came to town, they had like this huge wagon that's basically like a tour bus. And I was like, man, I wish we had a tour bus. Maybe there's something we can do about that. So sure enough, we have our battle of the bands. And during the day, some of the players were trying to think of ways we could promote ourselves and maybe bring in some of the farmers and whatnot from the outlying areas. So the Barbarian decides she wants to make some like posters and promotional stuff. And by the way, this is a good lesson on do not let the Barbarian do the arts and crafts. So the Dungeon Master is like, okay, you make your posters, make a roll to see like how good they turn out. She of course rolls a natural 1. And so we're all laughing about that. And then he decides like, well, because you rolled so poorly, you actually got the name of your own band wrong. And I'm like, well, she's a barbarian. We don't even know if she can read or write properly. Hopefully she can read music at least. But anyways, so instead of Crown of Madness, we have, I think it was Clown of Sadness or Clown of Dadness or something like that on these 4 posters. Sorry, losing my voice already. I've barely started the video. That's a bad sign. But because the town's so small, we fortunately only have these 4 posters, which we then decided would maybe become collector's items if we ever became successful. And that probably would have been the case, except for the tragic end at the end of this video. So anyways, so we have these 4 posters. We're all laughing about it. And of course, the Dungeon Master is constantly making jokes about it, about like, oh, people are like, oh, are you going to go see Clown of Dadness tonight? And someone's like, I thought their name was Crown of Madness. No, you must have misheard them. I got the poster right here, you know. Terrible. But anyways, so the evening comes along, we get ready for the Battle of Bands, and of course we have the battle, and needless to say, we absolutely crush it again. And basically, we all make performance rolls. The Dungeon Master just takes like all of our totals, basically for the entire band, compares that to the other band and all theirs, and you know, we see how well everybody does, right? And we absolutely destroy them in front of their home audience, right? So we win, and they're all upset and stuff. And we end up getting this manager, and he has like a contract so we can have these 3 gigs basically in these 3 different towns or cities. I don't even know what they were. And, you know, so we agree to that. There's some shenanigans that happens with him as well, but whatever. Ironically, the contract is actually for Clown of Sadness or whatever it was. So we agree that he's supposed to get 75% of the take. But as we point out later, it's like, well, you wrote for Clown of Sadness. We're Crown of Madness. So I guess you get 75% of nothing. So we were pretty happy with that too. But anyways, the Dungeon Master, of course, was quite upset with himself because here he was trying to like clown us, and turned out that, you know, we ended up screwing him instead. So it was funny. But anyways, I decided to go talk to this other band, right? And I'm trying to act very conciliatory towards them and trying to be very nice. And at first, they don't really want to hear anything from me. You know, they're pretty sure that I'm just there to like troll them or rub it in, right? But I'm like, no, you guys were great and blah, 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 you know, and I'm just trying to be like as nice as I can be. And I'm like, you know what? We have a contract for 3 different gigs, but what we don't have is a warm-up band. We want you guys to be our warm-up band. And they're kind of insulted at first, you know, that like we're trying to get them to be the warm-up act, you know. But I'm like, no, look, we think you guys are great. You just need more exposure. And the one guy's just like, man, like we couldn't even win a battle of bands in front of our hometown. And I'm like, but that's the problem. Everybody here's heard your stuff before. You're here all the time. What you need are new faces and new ears. People who've never heard your stuff. You need more exposure. This will be a great opportunity for you. So I'm just like selling it like crazy. And the Dungeon Master's like, okay, that's actually pretty good. Make a persuasion roll, right? And I actually have expertise on persuasion as well. That's my second expertise. I got performance and I have persuasion. And I roll like an 18 or a 17 or something like that. And sure enough, I managed to convince these guys, and I'm talking to them about, you know, how this get a great exposure and you can make more money. And, you know, look, this is a great town. We really like these people. You know, there's some really nice people here. But let's be honest, there's 14 people in this town. You need bigger audiences, you know? So, you know, more opportunity, more merchandising, more all this stuff, you know? So they start getting actually pretty excited about it. And they're like, yeah, okay, this sounds pretty good. And once I've got them on board, then I kind of drop the hammer. And I'm like, you know, problem is that it's really not going to look good if like the main act has to like roll in with a wagon and the warm-up band has this like awesome tour bus thing. I think you guys should let us use the tour bus for the tour. Not to keep, just for this tour. Obviously it's still your bus. Nobody's trying to take that from you. But I think you should let us use it since we're the headliner. Of course, they are not happy with this. So they get all mad. But once again, I'm trying to be all conciliatory and I'm smoothing things over. And the Dungeon Master is finally like, okay, that's pretty good. You can make another persuasion roll, but you have disadvantage because you're trying to like get them to give you their bus, right? And I'm like, okay, fine, right? But again, I have my bardic inspiration. I've got expertise. I end up rolling like an 18 and a 19 with disadvantage, and they rolled like a 3. So sure enough, the next morning, we roll out in the tour bus, and they've got like this crappy little wagon with all their stuff like jammed in it. Oh, just glorious, as I managed to smooth them out of their own bus. But anyways, so we're on our way to the first place, but it's still like a week away. We've got time to get there, and we pass into this town, and it's getting kind of late anyways, so we're thinking we're maybe stopping here regardless. And we see a few people out in the streets, but most of the lights are off, and the town looks like it's half deserted, So we go to the like local inn thing, and this town isn't very big either, by the way. I think there were 54 people in this town we established later. So considerably bigger than the last, but still not big, right? But hey, we're a brand new band. We're starting out our careers, right? So anyways, we managed to convince the innkeeper, who's kind of a jerk, to be honest, that we should be able to perform here and stay for free, because, a bunch of us do have the entertainer background, right? So he finally lets us stay at the town, and we start talking to the bartender and to the innkeeper. And the innkeeper's kind of rude, like I said, but the bartender's a little more friendly, and he starts telling us that, well, the reason the town looks deserted is because half the people are all sick. Or as the Dungeon Master put it, they're all down with the sickness, of course. Terrible. And so then the innkeeper pipes up and he's like, well, we think it's because there's this witch who lives on the outskirts of town and she has cursed the village. And if you kill the witch, it should break the curse and the town will be healthy. So, of course, we start thinking about sick town. We've got a week still to go before our next gig. We should do a benefit concert for these people. So, of course, we get all excited about that. And we're going to do this benefit concert for all the sick people here, right? So we decide to go to the witch's house. But because we're not a bunch of murder hobos, we decide to actually try talking to the witch. And she starts explaining to us that no, I had nothing to do with this. There actually used to be this magical bell that was in the church. It's like a magical cowbell. And yes, that's right, because this was everybody has a fever and the only prescription is more cowbell joke. Thanks, Dungeon Master. So we have to go fight the Blue Oyster Cult, I'm not even kidding you, and retrieve the magic cowbell. And then if we bring it to her, there's this magical ritual we can perform, which of course just so happens to be the lyrics to Don't Fear the Reaper by the Blue Oyster Cult. And when we're ringing the bell and performing the ritual, that should break the curse and lift the sickness. So we decide that this sounds like a lot of fun. We go to the dungeon the next morning, and sure enough, we end up finding the Blue Oyster Cult. We fight a bunch of cultists. We fight some of the traps and monsters and stuff. Fight our way through the dungeon. Apparently there were a bunch of prisoners we were supposed to rescue, but we just didn't go down that wing of the dungeon, so we never found them. We did find the cowbell, and we managed to kill the cult leader. The only thing is the cult worships this demon who is blue and has a giant head that looks like an oyster or a clam or something, because it's the Blue Oyster Cult, right? But we never find the demon, but we're like, whatever. We find the cowbell, we retrieve the bell, we bring it back to the witch, and she teaches us the ritual, which of course is Don't Fear the Reaper. And so we decide we're going to do our benefit concert that night and break the curse. So we go back to the inn and we tell them the good news, and we're trying to explain to them that we need them to bring everybody in the town to our benefit concert. And they explain to us, actually they don't have to be there physically. They can still be in their houses if they're sick. As long as you guys perform the ritual, it'll break the curse. But we're a bunch of barred egomaniacs, and we're like, no, we're doing a benefit concert. Everybody in the town must be at the concert. I don't care if you have to drag their bed with them in it to the concert. Everybody in this town needs to be at the concert. Otherwise, we won't be able to break the curse. So that's what we tell everybody as we like start trying to promote the concert. We just basically straight up lie to them and tell them they have to be there or it won't work, right? So sure enough, we managed to get everybody in the entire town because they all want to be cured, and people who aren't sick yet or are scared they might become sick, right? So we get everybody there for the concert. And our warm-up band finally shows up because they're like half a day behind us, right? But they strolled in the afternoon, so they perform. And fortunately, they actually rolled quite well. So fortunately for us, they didn't roll that well during the Battle of Bands, but they kind of got it together for this performance, right? And things are going good. And by now, we're up to like 5 super fans, by the way, I should mention, right? So all 5 of our super fans are here. So we've got like the whole town's here. And then, of course, we have our big dramatic pause while we're all getting ready. And we go on stage and we start performing our ritual, right? And one of the players wants to know if there's anybody in the town who's not here yet, which I thought was an interesting question. Very, very astute of her. And so the Dungeon Master's like, well, make a roll. Like, there's a lot of people you just haven't seen and don't know. But out of the people you have seen, you can identify most of them, right? So she rolls, nails the roll. And he's like, well, the only person you recall meeting that you haven't seen yet is the innkeeper. And Troy's like, yeah, that's because the innkeeper is the demon. And I'm like, what? And Troy's like, well, he sent us to go kill the witch to break the curse, but the witch ended up being the one that told us about the bell. She's the one that gave us the ritual. The witch is the one that's helping everybody in the town, not the innkeeper. He wanted us to kill her. Plus, the guy's been a jerk to us this whole time, and we never found the demon in the dungeon. He's still somewhere around here. And I'm like, holy cow, I think you're right. Sure enough. Oh, darned, I forgot a part of the story. In the dungeon, we find a bag of beans. That's going to be relevant as well. Because usually the bag of beans, you're supposed to like plant the beans. But the Dungeon Master, when we found it, we were like, okay, well, that's kind of cool, I guess. Not really useful. And the DM's like, well, as long as you like expose it to water, I'll say that it can happen instantly and you don't have to wait a minute. And that way you could like use it in like a fight if you had to, or combat. And we're like, okay, well, that's kind of cool. So we've only got 5 beans in our magic bag of beans. And the rogue currently has the bag on her, even though the bag probably is about as big as she is almost. But whatever. So that will be relevant in just a moment here. So sure enough, we realize that the innkeeper is probably the demon. And as we're like doing the ritual, we're all playing our instruments. The monk, by the way, one of the instruments she chose to have proficiency at character creation, was the cowbell. So she's out there playing the magic cowbell, which she's proficient in. And we're just nailing it as always. Of course, everybody has bardic inspiration. Everybody's passing it to the left and everything. And in the middle of the ritual, the innkeeper suddenly like starts walking through the crowd, or walking towards the crowd, and he's like, oh, you've ruined everything. And then he starts like floating above the ground and starts like floating towards us. And in midair, he starts to like change and like warp. And sure enough, he turns into this demon with this giant like clam oyster head thing, right? And so he like basically like is flying like directly above the crowd, because the crowd, I mean, it's only like 64 people or so, right? It's not really that many, so they're all kind of like huddled together in like fairly decent area, right? But it's not like the crowd's like all spread out everywhere, right? They're all kind of confined. You know, we don't have great acoustics. This is, you know, Middle Ages essentially, right? So everybody's kind of there, right? And he's like floating up above the crowd, and the rogue decides that she's going to go flying towards the demon, and she decides to use the bag of beans and try to throw it into his giant clam mouth while he's monologuing. So the Dungeon Master's like, well, make a hit roll, but I'm going to add 2 to the armor class because he's like talking, and you know, it's basically like half cover essentially, right? She gets a 24 to hit, throws this bean directly into his head. And of course, the Dungeon Master had already told us that, you know, the beans could work like basically the same round. And by the way, this is also a cautionary tale. Not just don't let the barbarian do arts and crafts, but also be very careful when you make changes to the way magic items work. Because something as innocuous as a bag of beans, if you allow it to function instantly, it can have some very strange results, it turns out. So we look it up in the Dungeon Master's Guide. There's a table there. You roll your D100 and you get a random result. He rolls 93. We look it up. A pyramid with a 60-foot square base bursts upward inside a sarcophagus containing a mummy lord. See Dungeon Masters. the pyramid counts as the Mummy Lord's lair, and inside the sarcophagus is treasure. But basically, this 60-foot base square pyramid erupts from the demon's head, instantly destroying the demon. And we're all like, yeah! However, then the Dungeon Master drops the hammer, so to speak, and reminds us that both the demon and our little pixie fairy girl are directly above the crowd. And a 60-foot pyramid falls onto the town, crushing the entire audience. We actually rolled to see if anybody survives. Nobody survives. We actually had spillover. There were more people killed than what were there. So the Dungeon Master, probably out of pure spite, decides that the warm-up band had actually gone out into the audience to watch us perform. And so they die with the town. Our 5 superfans are dead. All the people we were trying to heal are dead. And because we dragged them out of their houses where they would have been safe and they would have lived, every single person in the town is dead, except for us and our manager, who is backstage. And so, of course, there's like the, insert 1,000 Death Clock Metalocalypse type jokes that follow as we were like, the whole town's just instantly obliterated by this giant pyramid. And we're just like, finally we recover, and I'm like, well, we should at least finish the set. And the Dungeon Master's like, what? And everybody's just like, yeah, that's a good idea. We need to practice. So we finished the set, even though there's nobody left to hear it. And then I'm like, well, I guess we could just go stay at the inn again tonight. We got a big day tomorrow. So we go stay at the inn. And the next day we get back on the tour bus, which is now our tour bus because the warm-up band is crushed by the pyramid, and head out on the road again towards our first gig. And I couldn't believe just the sheer amount of ridiculousness that happened in this adventure so far. Like, we've literally played 2 weeks, and this is what's happened. It's just been absolutely insane. A number of like terrible music puns and jokes just never seems to end. Of course, I'm sure that every single thing we do is just going to be full of similar jokes to our cowbells and blue oyster cults. But either way, I thought it was really funny, so I just wanted to talk about it and share that story. I'm still going to be making regular video this week as well, but this one's just kind of an added bonus content, I guess. So anyways, I thought it was hilarious. Just the idea of this 60-foot pyramid erupting out of the demon. And we're all like, yeah! And then the pyramid lands on the crowd. And we're like, no! The entire town. Not one survivor. Because we dragged them from their houses and brought them to the concert to feed our own egos. I gotta say, though, it's like the greatest monster kill ever. Bag of beans, giant pyramid, blue oyster demon. Anyways, that's our story. As things continue, I'll probably make more videos and keep you updated, because this campaign appears to probably be the most ridiculous thing I've ever been a part of. And I'm enjoying it a lot so far. So thanks for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, leave your comments in the comment section. As always, of course, ring the bell for notifications, the cowbell of destiny there. And I will see you next time. Bye.